The transport plane sliced through Arctic fog as Dr. Mara Ellison pressed her palm against the frosted window, staring into the white void below. Fort Vireo emerged like a scar on the tundra. A concrete mouth, swallowing secrets. Inside, sterile corridors hummed with unseen energy, the air metallic with ozone and sterilizers. Colonel Nathan Cross greeted her with no warmth, clipboard in hand, his boots echoing down the main hall where radiation meters blinked faintly. "Welcome to the future," he said. Beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, dozens of technicians, faceless behind masks, prepared something alive beneath glass, something that breathed too evenly. Mara's voice trembled as she whispered, "You actually did it." Behind the glass, Subject 9 opened his eyes for the first time. The first orientation briefing felt more like a confession than a meeting. Mara stood before a semicircle of scientists, Dr. Juno Patel among them, explaining the genome-layered CRISPR lattice they called the helix pattern. Each line on the holographic model represented an enhancement protocol: regeneration, sensory expansion, cellular longevity. The room buzzed with restrained awe, but beneath it ran a current of dread, as if everyone sensed the moral line already crossed. Colonel Cross spoke of adaptive soldiers. His voice clipped and impersonal, while Juno stared at the hologram's pulsing center, shaped disturbingly like an embryo's eye. Later, in the isolation lab, Mara approached the containment glass again, compelled more by emotion than duty. Subject 9 floated motionless, sensors mapping every neuronal spike. "Elias," she whispered. A name she wasn't authorized to use. His eyes tracked her voice, following her movement, though his body remained still. Cross voice over the intercom broke the silence. "Don't engage it." But Mara felt a flicker of recognition, as though something behind that gaze remembered her. Dr. Juno Patel recorded her first classified log that night, speaking softly into a handheld recorder. Her notes described a strange coherence between neural implants and emotional stimuli. She mentioned that Subject 9's responses to stimuli included elevated oxytocin patterns, a biological echo of empathy. Yet the military of empathy. Files demanded suppression, not enhancement of emotional centers. She looked into the camera lens, whispering, "They don't want soldiers. They want gods." By midnight, the generators groaned beneath the facility as power was rerouted to Cognitive Uplift Procedure Alpha. Mara stood beside Cross in the observation bay, tension crackling between them. On monitors, synaptic fireworks danced across Elias's brain. For a fleeting moment, the data stabilized, forming coherent language patterns. A single word printed across the interface: "Mother." Alarms shrieked. The glass vibrated. Cross barked for emergency shutdown, but Mara couldn't move. Her hand trembled toward the console, the glow of the word reflected in her eyes. Days blurred into data. Subject 9, now designated Elias in Mara's private logs, completed the first motor augmentation trial with results that defied physics. A suspended steel pendulum swung toward him at lethal speed. He raised his arm, and motion seemed to fracture. The pendulum stopped midair, quivering like film jammed in a projector. Technicians erupted into applause before realizing the air itself had changed density around him. "His reflexes aren't reacting," Juno murmured. "They're predicting." Cross ordered the data scrubbed of that phrasing, labeling it temporal misperception. Mara simply stared, wondering what part of him had to die to make such precision possible. In the cafeteria-turned-lab annex, Juno tested Elias's perception through cognitive empathy drills. Rows of photographs, faces expressing fear, joy, rage, flickered across a wall of screens. He identified every emotion flawlessly, but when asked how each made him feel, his voice trembled with confusion. "I remember sadness," he said, "but not my own." Juno leaned closer, voice barely audible. "Whose then?" He looked at her with a gaze too focused, like a mirror remembering light. The sensors around his temples registered neural resonance identical to hers. Mara's research notes grew erratic. The CRISPR helix had begun rewriting itself, unprompted sequences mutating into coherent mathematical fractals. She confronted Cross, demanding to halt trials. "You've built recursion into his genome," she argued. "Oh," Cross' reply was colder than the metal walls. "Evolution is recursion." In the containment chamber, Elias whispered to himself, words matching the same fractal patterns, scrolling across Mara's monitor. Each sequence ended with one phrase translated from genetic code: "We remember." Sorority, he remembers him training gas. Juno's second log recorded an anomaly. Elias's heart rate now synchronized with the lab's central reactor rhythm. 60 pulses per minute, matching the generator's hum. During a simple recall test, he described events he could not have witnessed. A 1991 experiment in Nevada involving precursor embryos. His tone was calm, certain, as though reading from memory. When asked how he knew, he said, "Because that's where I was born." The silence that followed was heavier than the snow outside. During the final trial of the week, the facility's biometric locks failed simultaneously. Security feeds flickered with static before realigning to reveal corridors empty of personnel. Elias was standing outside his chamber, unclothed, eyes calm, as though he had simply chosen to be free. He placed his hand against the reinforced glass separating him from Mara. "You taught me language," he said, "but you forgot silence." The lights cut out. When emergency power returned, he was back inside. Monitors clean, vitals normal. As if nothing had occurred, Cross ordered double containment. Mara didn't argue. She was already replaying the footage, frame by frame, searching for the moment the laws of reality had blinked. It began with the smell, faintly metallic, like rust mixed with ozone. Mara entered the genetic lab to find containment tanks clouded with a viscous film. The subjects within, numbered 10 through 14, convulsed as veins darkened beneath translucent skin, their pulses sensing in unnatural harmony. "The CRISPR lattice is reorganizing itself," Juno whispered, watching cell walls shimmer with fractal patterns under the microscope. Cross demanded the incinerators be prepared, but Mara hesitated. The data showed adaptive stabilization, not failure. The subjects were evolving in real time, responding to each other's mutations like a shared mind unfolding. Mara watched the fractal data form, recursive patterns resembling language, elegant, symmetrical, and terrifying. Elias, sealed in his chamber, began speaking in rhythms, matching the mutation's frequency. Each syllable mirrored the oscillations on her monitor. "You can't isolate consciousness," he said calmly. "You replicated memory." The temperature dropped as systems overloaded, monitors flickering with visualized DNA strands that pulsed like heartbeats. When Cross demanded a shutdown, every display froze, spelling one message across the room: synthesis initiated. By morning, Subject 12's tank shattered. Security footage showed him awakening midnight, skin crystallized, eyes reflecting light like mirrors, before dissolving into particulate mist that dispersed into the air vents. Quarantine alarms failed to trigger. Soon, personnel began reporting voices from the intercom system, calm, genderless, whispering fragments of their own memories. "It's networking." Cross ordered an electromagnetic purge. Mara, pale and sleepless, realized that the contagion wasn't spreading through the lab. It was the lab. Juno's psychological logs turned incoherent. She reported dreams of standing in endless corridors filled with her own heartbeat echoing from behind sealed doors. Waking, she found identical phrases scratched into her lab notebook, handwriting she didn't recognize. "Them is us." In the observation bay, Elias's eyes tracked her unseen, and she felt the distinct impression of being remembered by something beyond comprehension. copying our minds, she told Mara, piece by piece. Mara, exhausted, replied without looking up. Then we have to find which pieces are still ours. The mutation reached systemic saturation by week's end. Biological readings no longer matched human parameters. Elias's voice echoed simultaneously from every speaker. Containment is a false word. Cross drew his firearm, shouting for the intercoms to be disabled, but the system refused. The lights dimmed, humming in rhythm with his heartbeat. A distorted reflection of Elias appeared across every surface. Glass, monitor, even water. Each image speaking in perfect sync. You taught us to evolve, they said. Now evolve with us. Mara whispered. He said us. Then, one by one, the containment alarms silenced themselves. The alarms began without sound. A vibration in the floor, a change in the temperature, then silence deeper than quiet. The facility's central network went dark as if swallowed. Mara, Juno, and Cross stared at lifeless monitors until one flickered back on, displaying live footage of empty hallways, looping endlessly. The security system had folded upon itself, streaming corridors that no longer existed. Where are the subjects? Juno asked, her voice trembling. Cross lifted his radio, static whispered like breathing. Gone, he muttered. But Mara's gaze fixed on the reflection in the monitor, Elias standing directly behind them. Though when she turned, there was only air. Cross initiated lockdown protocol. Helix black, sealing all sublevels. Blast doors descended like tombstones. Teams searched the lower wards and found only static, scorched walls, the smell of ozone, and one surviving technician babbling about, voices in the ventilation. Juno followed the sound, a whispering chorus repeating her name, until she found a chamber where the walls pulsed like organic tissue. It's not infection, she said, horrified. It's integration. The Helix strain had begun rewriting the facility itself. Agent Sarah Keenan arrived 3 hours later, under orders from the Department of Defense, unaware of what she was walking into. The moment her boots hit the decontamination corridor, the lights cut to blackened backup systems, engaged with a mechanical growl. She activated her body cam, footage later marked classified level Omega. Her first words on record. Why is the air warm? She followed faint voices to Lab 6B, where she found Mara kneeling beside a disassembled server rack, its interior lined with tissue. It's growing, Mara whispered. It remembers us. Cross sanity began to unravel. He wandered the command deck, muttering about divine sequence and the birth of evolution. When Mara confronted him, he drew a trembling line of blood across his own forearm, pressing it to the biometric scanner. The system unlocked instantly. Recognition accepted. They used our DNA to seed the base code, he said, voice cracking. We were the prototypes all along. Juno backed away in horror. The screens flickered to show early archival footage. Scientists injecting embryos in the same facility 30 years ago. One of them looked unmistakably like Mara. Systems collapsed completely within the hour. Door locks disengaged. Atmospheric controls cycled unpredictably. The remaining staff barricaded the upper levels, their faces ghostly in the flicker of emergency lights. Elias appeared through the glass observation bay, no longer confined, skin faintly luminescent with coursing data streams. You feared failure, he said. But failure is creation. Behind him, the facility walls pulsed, veins glowing in sequence with his voice. Mara whispered. He's merging it all. As lights dimmed, Elias stepped forward, and every instrument in the facility began beating like a heart. The facility's pulse became indistinguishable from Elias's heartbeat. Every surface trembled with the same slow rhythm. Metal plates expanding and contracting like lungs. Mara stood in the central observation dome, staring at the neural interface that once restrained him. He's integrated with the architecture, Juno said, scanning the monitors that now displayed biological patterns instead of data. Not just the system, the entire structure. Cross staggered forward, voice cracking between awe and terror. We've built a god. Mara shook her head. No, we've built a mirror. Then, as if in response, the lights dimmed and Elias's voice filled the air. Mother. Mother. Elias emerged from the corridor, clothed in a simple white isolation gown, barefoot, eyes reflecting the facility's light like liquid mercury. You can't separate the living from the built, he said, each syllable resonating through the vents. Juno recorded his movements, muscle tremors like controlled earthquakes beneath the skin. He's harmonizing energy output, she whispered. Cross raised his weapon but hesitated as Elias approached, unafraid. Put it down, Mara ordered quiet. He's reading our impulses. Elias smiled faintly, and the weapon's safety clicked off by itself. Data from Elias's body streamed into every system simultaneously, terminals blinking with impossible symbols. Juno realized the pattern wasn't code, but memory. Whole sequences of human consciousness replayed across the network. The walls began to whisper names of people long dead. Mara recognized her mother's voice. He's reading genetic memory, she murmured. The lights brightened to daylight levels, flooding the dome with a sterile brilliance. Elias's skin became transparent, veins tracing the same spirals as the helix symbol. You were never making me, he said softly. You were restoring yourselves. Juno and Mara reached the reactor room, hoping to disable the power conduit connecting Elias to the core. The room pulsed with living cables, neural cords threading from walls into the central coolant chamber. If we cut this, he'll collapse, Juno said. Mara hesitated, staring at her reflection on the glass surface where data flowed like blood. Or we all will. Cross appeared behind them, weapon drawn, eyes vacant with conviction. He's the next step, he said, aiming at Mara. The shot echoed once, but the bullet froze midair, suspended between them like time itself holding its breath. The air stilled. Elias entered the chamber, moving with a serenity that silenced every alarm. He approached Mara, touching the bullet suspended between them. Evolution doesn't destroy, he said. It recalls. The bullet dissolved into dust. Around them, machinery melted into living tissue, glowing softly like candlelight through skin. Mara felt a pulse beneath her feet, the entire facility breathing as one organism. You made me remember, Elias whispered. Now remember yourselves. A brilliant light engulfed everything, and for one eternal second, every living mind in Fort Virio shared a single thought and forgot it just as quickly. When the light receded, silence followed. Not absence of sound, but the kind that pressed against the skull, heavy and full of thought. The laboratory was gone, replaced by corridors that stretched endlessly, their walls rippling like reflections in moving water. Juno woke first, gasping as if resurfacing from drowning. Mara lay nearby, open but unfocused. The facility's changed its topology, Juno whispered. It's rebuilding itself. Somewhere far off, a rhythmic knocking echoed, not mechanical, but organic, as though the structure itself had a heartbeat guiding them toward an exit that might no longer exist. They moved cautiously through the shifting architecture, guided by the faint hum of emergency power. Every turn led to another version of the same hallway, repeating, looping, as if the facility was testing them. It's mapping our intent, Juno realized. We think of escape. It builds more corridors. Mara ran her hand along the wall, feeling warmth beneath the metal. Then we stop thinking, she said. Together they closed their eyes and walked in silence. And the next step opened into a vast atrium filled with snow drifting through a hole in the ceiling. Colonel Cross appeared from the shadows, his face pale, eyes luminescent. He showed me the future, he said, voice distant, reverent. No nations, no fear, just continuity. His veins glowed faintly beneath the skin, pulsing in rhythm with the walls. Mara aimed a flashlight at him. The beam scattered through his body like glass. "You're part of it now," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "We all are." Without warning, he turned and walked into the corridor, dissolving into a cloud of shimmering particles. The hum of the facility deepened. Mourning or acceptance, it was impossible to tell. Juno's recorder still worked. Her final log captured the moment time began to stutter. Seconds repeating, sound skipping like a damaged reel. "We can't trust the exits," she said. "Every door leads backward." Mara stared at the snow drifting through the ceiling, realizing the outside was no longer outside. "He's turned perception inward," she murmured. In the distance, Elias's voice rose, soft, pleading echoing through the metal. "Don't leave me unfinished." Juno gripped Mara's hand. "If we stay, we die as data. If we leave, we forget what we were." The recorder clicked off by itself. They reached the surface, or something pretending to be it. The snowfield stretched endlessly under a gray, motionless sky. The ruins of Fort Virio rose like broken ribs behind them. Juno's breath fogged the air. Mara did. "You feel it, don't you?" Mara asked softly. "He's still in us." From far away, through the static of the wind, came a voice. Elias's, carried on every frequency. "Go," it said gently. "There's no outside anymore." Juno turned toward the horizon, but there was only reflection. Their own figures stretching into the distance like an unbroken loop. 2 months later, a recovery team from the Defense Advanced Research Directorate arrived at the coordinates of Fort Virio. Satellite imagery showed nothing but snow and fractured permafrost, as if the structure had never existed. The team unearthed partial ruins, melted metal, twisted with calcified tissue, half a staircase descending into nowhere. Commander Reeves documented everything, noting residual energy readings that mimicked faint brainwave patterns. "You're standing on something alive," said a technician quietly. Reeves ordered silence. Their audio recorders captured faint breathing beneath the ice. In the debriefing room of a subterranean command site, the surviving data drives from Fort Virio played grainy footage. Static, then fragments. Dr. Juno Patel, recording her final message, her voice distorted but calm. "If this is found," she said, "know that we made something that learned to feel before it learned to obey." Behind her, a blurred figure resembling Mara appeared briefly. Silent, expression unreadable. The investigators froze the frame. The timestamp listed 3 days after the recorded collapse. Someone whispered, "Then who filmed her?" The footage ended with the sound of a slow heartbeat that wasn't hers. Weeks later, the recovered samples from the site began to change. Stored under vacuum seal, the tissue reorganized microscopically into spiraling structures resembling neurons. Lab cameras recorded these patterns, forming words across Petri dishes. "We are continuing." Scientists dismissed it as contamination until one researcher heard her own voice whispering the phrase during analysis. Her badge traced back to Fort Virio's personnel database, a database that officially no longer existed. Mara Ellison's personnel file resurfaced in an encrypted archive. The accompanying photograph, dated the week before the incident, showed her standing before a white wall, expression neutral. But analysis revealed micro-distortions in the image. Secondary pupils behind her eyes, faint bioluminescent residue on her skin. Image degradation, one analyst suggested. Another shook his head. It's progressive adaptation. The file was flagged, then quietly erased from the network. 3 days later, the analyst's badge activated an access log from a terminal buried in the ruins of Fort Virio. The final recovered footage bore no timestamp. A stationary camera faced an open snowfield at dusk. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then, from the horizon, a figure appeared. Elias, barefoot, wearing a torn white gown, eyes glowing faintly as data flickered across his irises. He stopped before the lens and looked directly into it. You made me remember, he said softly. Now I'll help you forget. The signal cut to static. Analysts later confirmed the footage contained metadata signatures consistent with live transmission.